This message was not actually one that I was planning on giving, uh, but it's just as much a part of my history as any of the rest of the messages that I could ever give you. A lot of people, they know very simple truths about me at this point. Actually, this is a message that I wasn't even planning on. I didn't have written out. I decided, well, I wanted to write it out, but I felt like it needed to flow freely and actually come from my heart. When I was younger, my mom taught me certain truths about my family. Things that aren't even being allowed in U.S. history books at this point. Things such as the fact that my family, my ancestry, happened to be part of the Underground Railroad. This is a truth that I didn't have to fully have explained to me. But what she told me was this. She said, the Underground Railroad was a system of people that desired to free people from slavery by moving them as they needed to. With me, even at a young age, I understood how slavery was wrong and how people didn't deserve to be a slave to anything or truly even anyone. Because I had heard about Moses and the Israelites and how difficult the Israelites had it while they were in Egypt. I heard about people being treated harshly. And I even heard from the ministers, and this was at a young age that I was hearing this stuff, that some of these Israelites were being killed while they were in Egyptian captivity. And I looked at it, and I thought in my head, this isn't right. This shouldn't be the way that the world happens to work. And when I heard that before I was born, that honestly, the US had similar things in regard to people who were, as I knew them, African American at that point. Now I know them as, hey, whichever way happens to come across to you as being most respectful, whether you'd rather be called an African American or a black person, whatever happens to work, or if you just want to be known as one of my brothers. Because honestly, I mean, I was raised in the ghetto, so I know what it's like. Also, beyond that, I'm not going to say that I fully understand slavery, though I understand slavery that goes on up here that's been placed there because of religious people who don't know anything better, who don't know the truth about who God is. I know what it's like to be mentally flogged, not even just by the church, but also by myself, for mistakes that I had made. I knew what it was like to be punished for things that I didn't even understand fully at that point in time why I was being punished for them. I understood these things, but I didn't understand the full extent. I mean, after enough abuse, even if it's not intentional, a person does get to the point where fight or flight becomes, do I continue to fight to keep myself alive, or do I kill myself and get out of this situation permanently? I understand what that's like because I've been through it. But I don't understand fully what it's like to be beaten almost to death or even to death. I mean, nobody can fully understand after a person's dead because the person's already been beaten to death. I understand what it's like to be emotionally and mentally beaten so severely by the judgments of others. I get that. But I don't understand. And I will say, I understand what it's like to be physically abused. I do. I'm not going to tell you all the details, but I'll say I've been physically abused in relationships in the past. I've been abused in all sorts of ways that I'd rather never relive. But this isn't on that subject. What I'm currently wanting to say goes more into when my mom told me that my ancestry had been connected to these people. My first thought wasn't, well, why? Instead, it was, whoa, that's amazing. And it wasn't because she happened to say it in such a way that I felt like I had to say that, but rather it was the way that I truly felt. Somebody who would actually fight for the rights of somebody else, even though they don't have to me happens to be a beautiful thing. And then when my mom and I watched PBS, well, we're watching PBS one time. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech came on. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, I'm not the only white person, and my family's not the only group of white people who happen to stand as firmly, because I was looking at the crowd. I was seeing that it wasn't just black people that were gathered at this speech. Instead, there were black people, there were white people. There may have been other races that I didn't even notice. But I looked at it and I said, this is how powerful this truth happens to be. It goes deeper than me. It goes deeper than my mom. It goes deeper than my family. It goes deeper than all of this. There were people from basically all walks of life that I could tell, other than maybe even slave masters, that looked at it and said, you know what? This is wrong. People should not be treated like this. I listened to this speech.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
And I listened to the words.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
And I heard the truth.
This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice.
And it reached my heart.
It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
It touched me.
100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
It touched my heart.
This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
And we all deserve it.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice.
This is what we need to remember.
In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day I shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made level, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. On the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I listen to that man, who in my opinion is not just another man. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have to agree. He's a man with a dream. A dream that, in my opinion, happens to be absolutely gorgeous. Because it's not about division. It's not about inequality. It's not about one person being above another. It's not about should be my way or the highway. It's not about anything of that nature. It's about everybody being equal. And I'm going to be 100% honest. I stand behind his dream. I stand behind that speech because it's not just a speech. It's something that somebody truly believes in. That he, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., believed in. And it's a beautiful thing. Because it's not talking about the injustice continuing. It's talking about it finally ending. And it should be the way that it is. We shouldn't keep on having to strive for freedom and keep on striving for inequality in the process. We shouldn't. And yet, I will actually admit something that very few other people will admit. And that's the fact that inequality still exists. But it's not the way that most people see it. Or most people might even think it. I went to college at a local community college. I almost made it to be able to get my associates. Only one class happened to keep me from it, and that class was actually Algebra 2. For some reason, I didn't understand it. I understand geometry extremely well, but that's because my dad taught me woodworking from about the age of 5, I'd have to say. He didn't really let me work with it until later, but he was teaching me things even at that young of an age. though I didn't fully understand what he was teaching me until I actually went through the class. But when I was at this community college, I'm going to leave the name out. But when I was at this community college, I took a history class. And I expected that it wasn't going to be pointed against me. Because I happen to be a white male. By the end of that class, I was almost to the point of hating myself. Because of how pointed against the white male the class had become. The history books happen to record it as being, even though I know that people manipulate things a lot to be able to make it seem more biased against people that they want it to be biased against. Thing is, I've never been against a black person. I've loved black people. I've had second mamas who are black. I probably had more second mamas that were black than were honestly white. That's part of the reason that I've actually had it where people, where friends have looked at me and said, you know, your black girl showing. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait, what? What? But then I look at it and I'm like, makes sense. I mean, when I've had that much connection, tone of skin really doesn't mean too much. I've been given the card by different people, and I look at it and I'm like, I'm not going to use that. I don't care what well, if it's you're giving me permission for it, I find it to be a negative term. And I don't think that anybody should be using it, whether it be to address somebody with or as a derogatory term to be able to use against somebody. I don't. But yet people think that just because I happen to have white skin, that I happen to be a white boy. It goes deeper than that. It's not skin color that really matters. Never has been with me. Because I don't see somebody and say, hey, they're black or hey, they're white. Instead, I look at it and I'm like, they're my brothers and sisters. And when it comes to equality, I already knew that equality happened to be accurate because Jesus showed who happened to be important when he died on the cross, not just for white people, not just for black people, not just for Jews, not just for Gentiles, but for everyone. No matter who they happen to be. He didn't look at it and say, okay, this is only for you. He said, I love all y'all. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Okay. That includes everybody. I don't care who you are. And then I believe it was Paul addresses, while we were still enemies of God, Jesus Christ gave his life for us freely. Okay. That again tells me that his love isn't biased. And as his love isn't, why should my love be? Why should anybody's love be? Thing is, we shouldn't be biased towards one another. We should love one another even as Christ loved us, even as Christ still loves us. But then we have these movements that are encouraged by people that we don't even think they'd be encouraged by. Like the Black Lives Matter movement. I pointed out to a friend of mine, well, somebody who was my friend until they decided to block and delete me after I made this statement. I said, I can't solely will go with your viewpoint because you're saying that only Black Lives Matter. And I can't agree with that. Because all lives matter. We all need one another. And people might not like hearing that, but it's the truth. And this is the kind of honesty that I will give you. Because I love you enough that I'm willing to be honest with you. And this isn't me saying, hey, you got to be nicer to me. No. This is me saying, hey, we need to be able to get on the same page when it comes to love. Because we need to be able to love one another even as Christ loved us. It's not an easy bunch of messages that I have to give. And some of these messages may even be hard for me to give. But I love you enough that I'm willing to give them, even if they are difficult. Even if they rip at my heartstrings. Even if editing them, which it's been this way with certain messages, even if editing them hurts me, due to some of the things that I've been through. Whether it be recent past, whether it be things that I can admit I'm still dealing with and God's still bringing me through. I love y'all enough that I'm willing to go through emotional and mental turmoil just to be able to deliver messages to you. That I'm willing to deny myself the ability to completely walk fully in peace because of the flesh, the battle between flesh and spirit that takes place in me. I love y'all enough that I'm willing to admit that I struggle. There are still some things that I look at and I struggle with. I love you enough that I'm willing to be able to be open, I'm willing to be able to be completely transparent in ways that I've even been hesitant in the past when it came to a person that I was in a relationship with. I'm willing to be more transparent than I even was in that. So it tells you that I love you, no matter who you are. I'm willing to expose truths about myself, but also about the church and about the world system that I'm not necessarily comfortable addressing. And my love isn't pointed solely towards men or solely towards women or solely towards this race or that race. No. I love everyone equally. Even if a lot of them don't love me. Even if a lot of people might want to throw the first stone towards me for one reason or another, I still love you. I've had to work through, well, God's had to bring me through fear that I didn't even know how to get past. He's had to bring me through things that I look at, and before I came through them, I was scared stiff that something like some of the things that took place would take place. And then once they took place, I looked at it and I said, okay, well, it was something that took place, but I'm still alive. So therefore, that fear wasn't truly justified. Because when I faced it, it was broken off of my life. All I had to do was face it. Was it easy? No. Was it worth it? Yeah. Because now I'm able to give you the messages that I would have looked at and said, not doing it. I don't care how much you pay me. Now I'm able to look at it and say, I'm doing it. I don't care how much you pay me not to. Back in the day, I possibly would have looked at it and said, I might think about not preaching some of the messages that God's given me. If somebody offered me a nice house, a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, and nice, soft, kind of baby pink that happens to be, let's see here, convertible, but I don't want the automatic convertible. Instead, I want it to be where it's a manual convertible, because the automatic ones, they have the things blow out, well, their mechanisms blow out way too easily. I said, I'd be willing to walk away from all of this to have an easy life. But now I look at it and I say, I'm willing to give these messages even if for some reason they end up taking my life. Of course, after the message that God gave me on Sunday morning, I'm trusting God that He's going to keep me alive until it's His time to call me home. I'm trusting God that He's going to give me the true desires of my heart that go even beyond the family. Well, actually, I never really truly dreamed of having a family, but I dreamed of having a wife and a nice country house with a white picket fence. And a nice car to be able to drive to and from church. And another car to be able to drive to work. Actually, a truck to be able to drive for work. Now I'm looking at it, and if you really want to know what the true desire of my heart happens to be at this point, it's not for all that stuff of this world. That stuff's going to fade. That stuff's going to pass. Instead, my desire happens to be that people will actually get freedom through the messages that God gives me and has given me. Freedom from fear, freedom from things that have kept them bound for years. My dream is to be able to give people love in ways that other people don't know how to. My dream is to be able to reach people on levels that many people would never even consider. And to be able to show the true love of God. Part of the reason that happens to be one of my biggest dreams at this point is because I dealt with fear. I dealt with pain. I dealt with rejection. I dealt with inner turmoil. I've dealt with abuse. One of the worst things that I can honestly say that I ever dealt with. It wasn't even something that came from my family. It was something that came from a legalistic church. What I mean by that isn't just a church. I'm talking about the entirety of so many churches that I've been through. I've been rejected by. That I've had the first stone thrown at me because of. For one reason or another, anything and everything that I did just wasn't good enough. And they'd always seem to pick me to be able to attack. And that hurt in ways that most people would look at and say, it shouldn't have hurt that way. Yeah. When everybody else is thought of as being a saint, well, actually, no. let me change that. When everybody else is thought of as being perfect, and you're the one that every church seems to target as being imperfect, it hurts. It does. And they always seem to find this one flaw to be able to pull at and pull at and pull at. Yeah, that hurts. And this is why eventually that which doesn't kill you actually makes you bold enough, actually makes you strong enough to be able to say, you know what? I'm willing to take what God has given me to society. To a society where this kind of stuff is taking place. I'm willing to take it to people who have been rejected, but also I'm willing to take it to people who are doing the rejecting. And that might seem like something I should be afraid of. But after a while, you get tired of being afraid. You get tired of sitting there while everybody else happens to seem to be doing okay. You get tired of it. While everybody else seems to be elevated and you're sitting there and you're having it where not only churches, but it seems that the entirety of society has rejected you in one way or another. You get tired of it. And you get to the point where you're either angry or you're bold. There is a difference. Anger is where fear happens to be controlling you to the point where it has taken over. Boldness is where you look at it and you say, okay, something needs to change. And it's either going to be that something needs to change in you, which oftentimes is the case, or something needs to be addressed. No, I didn't say fought against. I said addressed. To the public. To say, you know what? The way that this has been taking place isn't right. But it doesn't need to be from a position of hostility. Even Martin Luther King Jr. would say that. And he did. But instead, it needs to be done in a way that you get your point across, but you do it in love. If the Lord wills it, then the next section that I'm going to be giving is basically the foretelling messages. I'm going to set up for giving the messages that I'm going to give them. There were messages that were given to me when I was a teenager. Little did I know that they were telling what was going to end up taking place when I became an adult. But I'll get into that a little bit deeper when the time comes, when the Lord desires for it to take place. Like I said, I wasn't even planning on giving this message, but I saw a need for it. And because the need was there, I looked at it and I said, I think it's time for me to address it. Because when it comes to some of the things that have taken place in society, if it were possible for the great Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to be turning over in his grave, he'd be doing it. He would. In fact, at this point, he'd probably be looking at it and saying, I don't believe that it's possible for my dream to come to pass this side of heaven. There are a lot of people that say, oh yeah, I love Martin Luther King Jr. Oh yeah, I stand behind that dream speech 100%. But yet their actions don't align with it. And there are a lot of people who say, yeah, I agree. Equality should definitely be there. But it's bad when you happen to have people coming to places like McDonald's. They're willing to open up about the truth, about the fact that the equality is not there. Either the pastors are getting so much, being treated like royalty, basically, while other people in the church are being treated like they're nothing. Or you've got society that happens to be acting similarly. Oh, well, this person happens to be preferred, therefore they are a saint, they are an angel, they're God. But that's not at all the kind of dream that Martin Luther King Jr. had, or even a symbol of equality. It isn't. Instead, it's saying this person's better and this person stinks, or this person's just absolutely terrible, but this person's great. There's a song that comes to my mind. I'm not going to play it, but there's a song that comes to my mind, and it's done by John Rubin, and he was a Christian rapper, but he was able to address it in ways that most people just can't, or they won't. The name of the song was Do Not. And two of the lines that he happened to give happened to be the fact that we lack unity and enjoy separation. And no matter how much I want to be able to say that that's not accurate, I've seen it so many times that I wonder if we don't just lack unity, but if we hate the idea of unity. And I shouldn't have to say that. I shouldn't be able to say that. But when it seems that one side's always elevated over the other one, and nobody seems to actually look at it and say, you know what, let's come together. Instead it's, hey, get out of my presence, get out of my sight. You aren't even worthy of tying my shoes. I mean, you don't deserve anything. In fact, you should be cast under a bus. So being able to say, you know what, you're a fellow human. And I love you enough that I'm willing to do what I can to be able to help you. There's a problem in this world. When we aren't willing to love one another, but instead we choose to reject one another, we choose to judge one another. And I'm not going to look at it and say that I'm always that much better, because I've been terrible in the past. But I've been that way due to the fact that, honestly, it wasn't for the reason that some people would think, which would be, oh, well, you just didn't like this person. Instead, it was, I had to choose between my life and being in a relationship. Either I was going to kill myself or I was going to get out of that relationship. And two people happened to come along that said, you know what, you need to get out of that relationship or we're walking away from you. And I looked at it and I said, but what about if I lose the kids that I've helped to raise? But exactly that took place. And now I look at it and it's not easy by any means. Still love those kids as though they happen to be mine, but I can't see them at this point. And some people would say, well, maybe it's better that way. And I look at it and I'm like, well, it's been probably about 4.5 years. I've gotten to the point where instead of being against it, I accept it. But it doesn't mean that getting to this point was at all easy, because I still love those kids. You know, I helped to raise them on and off from the ages of 3 and 4 years old to the point where I think the youngest was 17 and the oldest was 18. Walking away from that situation, from two people that I loved to that degree, was a lot. But I knew that if I continued on in that relationship with their mother being the person that she was towards me, that I was going to be dead. Because I had been through so much in that relationship. From the beginning of that relationship. So much, I heard so many lies, so much deceit. And I looked at it and I said, and every time that I brought any of this up, it was put on me. Well, if it's a system by the name of gaslighting. I had been in that relationship for that long and dealt with that for that long. Ended up coming to the realization that she had been in a relationship at one point in time with my old best friend. That's not something that anybody should have to go through. With me, I hated walking away from those kids, but the way that their mother had been towards me, I couldn't. And one thing that she said was, honestly, you have the choice. You can either stay with me or you can lose the kids. And this is something that she said in the beginning. And the judge ended up taking the kids, saying, you know what? You can't have contact with them. But it wasn't because of something that I had done. It was because of the way that their mother, I had gone into that courtroom. I had placed a 50B restraining order on her. I listed my old church. I listed the house that my friends at the time happened to be living in. And I believe I listed my parents' house on places where she couldn't go, to be able to protect them and be able to make it so that she didn't find some way to be able to say, ha ha. But the reason why I even went through with it in the first place was because she had been telling me the night before I had actually decided to place it, that she and her daughter had rolled out on people, if you understand what that means. Basically means that they had attacked people. So I looked at it and I said, okay, I can't trust her. Might be able to trust the daughter, but I definitely can't trust her not to try to attack me or my friends or my family or my church members. Well, or my fellow church members. I looked at it and I said, I've got to have it where this is in place. And the two people that I was living with at the time agreed wholeheartedly with it. And I'm pretty sure just about anybody would understand why. Especially given something that I've given in the past when it comes to the group that I used to be connected to, though I didn't necessarily want to be fully connected to them. The judge ended up looking at me and saying, not only am I going to place it based on the testimony that I had given, not only am I going to place it on her, I'm going to place it on you. Not only am I going to place it on the two of y'all, but I'm also going to place it on your families. Not only am I going to place it on your families, but I'm also going to place it on your friends. None of y'all are to have any kind of connection towards any other part. And the thing is, I had known that that was going to take place. I knew that it had to take place for it to actually stick. I knew that the judge knew that that was going to have to take place for it to actually stick. And the judge asked me, are you okay with this? And I said, I started to say, yeah. And then she said, but it's going to be off the records so that it won't affect either one of you getting a job or anybody connected to you from being able to get a job. And I still looked at it and I said, okay. And she said, are you willing to abide by this? And I said, yes. And then my now ex said this week. And then tried to say even more, and the judge said, I don't care whether he happens to say it for this week or for the rest of eternity. This is going on police record. That means that his this week is permanent. And that there isn't a way to be able to redact this, be able to take it back. And the judge looked at me again and said, do you understand this? And I said, yes, I do. She said, are you still willing to go with this? I said, yes, I am. Because I didn't want anything to happen to anybody involved in that situation. Because I cared too much about him. Even beyond that, though, I didn't want to take any chances. And this is going to sound really unusual, but I'm going to be honest with it. I didn't want to take any chances of the kids feeling like they're being pushed towards harming me. Because the mother happened to have a vendetta against me. Might sound a little bit unusual, but I didn't want the kids to end up feeling like they had to do something based on the fact that their mother had been hurt. I also didn't want them to have to choose between me and their mother. And I wanted it to be where if they were even given the possibility to choose, that they would choose the mother. Because she's biologically their parent. They had already lost their dad by biological birth. I mean, to me, I looked at it and I said, you know what? I'm willing to go through so that she doesn't have to. But at the same time, I looked at it and I said, even beyond that, though, I know that if either one of those kids happened to reach out to me, I would have went back. Not for her, but for those kids. Honestly, this position in my history happens to explain to me why a particular song has been playing on and off for the past week and a half in my head. And it's one done by TobyMac. And I'd play it, but it's so new that it would probably block this video from being up. But it's a song where one of my favorite kids starts out. Wasn't biologically mine, and honestly isn't even connected to me. God rest his soul. But he starts out by saying, stories. We've all got them. We do. We've all been through something. And some of us are still going through things that most people would not even want to consider. With me, the church that I've always prayed for almost seems like they reject me. But it seems like churches often do that with me. Always wanted a church where the pastor could preach two different messages in the same day, and neither one of them would be the exact same. Where the pastor would preach two sermons back to back, and they wouldn't be the same thing. Because he was that led by the Spirit. Always wanted a church where the praise and worship happened to be moving. Happened to have some flavor to it. Got it. And I'm able to serve there, thankfully. But it's almost like there's a bias that happens to even still remain. And that's not easy. But it's the world that I live in, apparently. It's a church that I've always prayed for. Also, I wanted a church where if God led me to give $100 a month, which is a large portion of the check that I happen to get, if he did that, then I'd be willing to give it to him because I knew that they happen to work that much in outreach. He gave it to me. I'm thankful for it. Always wanted a church that was truly passionate about the Lord. I got it. Of course, I'll tell you, there are times when I wish that what was inside matched what was outside. It's not an easy thing to say, but it's the truth. Because I love this church and I love everyone in it, including the pastor. Sometimes I wish that skin color didn't matter so much. Or at least that it didn't matter so much to other people. Because I don't care what color you are. You could be a purple elephant for all I care, with blue spots. I'd still love you as though you happen to be my own brother or my own sister. Because we are brothers and sisters in the Lord. We are. And I know that this message is probably reaching several people on several different levels. And I want y'all to know that I love you. But I want you to know even more than my love that God loves you. That God loves each and every one of us. He does. And nothing could ever separate us from his love, because his love doesn't fail. Where earthly love might fail, the Heavenly Father's love does not fail. Where others want to judge, God looks at each and every one of us, at you, at me, at everybody. He says, I love you with an undying love. Where others may fail you, even when everyone else may fail you, still his love remains the same. Where others may look at you and reject you, still his love remains the same, and he loves you with an undying love that will never fade, that will never pass away. Like I said, I love y'all. But even more importantly is God's love. The fact that he loves you. And his love will never fail. Pray to the peace of God. That peace which passes all understanding goes with each and every one of us as we continue on from this point. Little children, love one another. Godspeed.